y'all, Dawn here with 7 Acres Homestead, and I want to thank you for joining us for lesson number 3 in your home canning series, which is Canning 101. Today we're going to be talking about safety in canning, and I know you guys are like, oh my gosh, when is she going to get to actually canning something? But I feel like if you are brand new to canning, these are some of the things that you really need to have in mind before you get started. So today we're going to start with canning safety. Okay, now I hope you guys don't mind me referring to my notes on the first part of this lesson because I want to make sure I'm pronouncing things correctly, because the thing we're going to talk about first of all, before anything else, is botulism. And I know you guys have heard this term. I know you've heard the horror stories. Oh my gosh, home canned food will kill you because it's got botulism in it, blah, blah, blah. Okay, first of all, let's talk about what botulism is. Botulism is the actual condition that is caused by the botulinum toxin. Okay? It's a highly potent neurotoxin. Now, is it deadly? Yes, it can very well be deadly. It can cause breathing issues. It can cause your heart to stop. It can cause inflammation in your brain. It can cause all kinds of horrible things. So don't think that I'm minimizing what botulism is. Okay? Now, there are lots of ways around botulism. Botulism can be found in many places. It can be found in dust floating around in the air. It can be found in the soil. It can be found in a lot of different places. Now, botulism toxin is killed at temperatures exceeding 185 degrees and held there for 5 minutes. That will kill any botulism toxin that may be in any type of food that you're canning. Therefore, the reason we heat process our home canned food is for the purpose of killing any botulism spores that may be in the food. Now, with the proper heat applied for the proper amount of time, that's going to be something that's going to happen every single time you can something, okay? Now, the toxin, if not killed, can lay dormant in the food, and it will be activated by oxygen, which means that you won't be able to see it, you won't be able to smell it, you won't be able to tell that it's there. The only way you're going to know that it's there is when you get sick. But opening your jar and letting that oxygen into your canned food, that is what's going to activate that toxin, okay? So, here are some good things to know. The botulinum toxin cannot grow in conditions with a pH level of higher than 4.6. So acidic foods like fruits and tomatoes and pickles and stuff can usually be safely canned in a water bath canner, which is your basic canner that you can get pretty much anywhere. And it's not a pressure canner, it's just a regular canner. However, there are a lot of foods that have a pH lower than 4.6, and that includes things like meats, meat products, and a lot of vegetables that just don't have enough acid in them to be above 4.6. Therefore, a pressure canner should be used with those particular products. Typically, that is the recommendation. Now, the point of this is that you want to make sure that the internal portion of your food, what's in the very center of that jar, gets at least to that 185 degrees for at least 5 minutes. That way you know that all the spores are killed. Now, that being said, there are groups of people all over the world that do not use pressure canners. We use them here in the U.S. It is recommended here in the U.S. However, the Amish, they don't use pressure canners. What they do in order to get that internal temperature up to the right spot for that long is they water bath can anything with a low pH level for 3 straight hours in the water bath canning. and that is with the water at least 1 inch above the top of your jar. Now, I'm not going to tell you not to use pressure canner. Okay, that is something that everyone's going to have to decide for themselves. I personally prefer to use the pressure canner. That way I don't have any issues. I know that everything is safe. And I also use a lot less electricity running the pressure canner for 75 or 90 minutes than I do running the water bath for 3 hours straight. Also in the summer, it can be a consideration when heating up your house. It takes a lot more of the air conditioning running in order to offset that and keep your house somewhat manageable. Now, if you're worried about the pH levels in your food, one of the things you can do is you can go on Amazon and you can order pH test strips. And if you open a can of food that you water bathed and you're not 100% sure about the pH level, you just pop one of those little testers down in there and it'll tell you exactly where your pH level is. So that is one thing that you can do to check the pH level. Now, also keep in mind that people all over the world can without pressure canning. And the 3-letter agencies, such as the FDA, are the same people that are approving doctors injecting the botulism toxin into people's skin for the sake of removing wrinkles under names such as Juvederm or Botox. So just kind of keep this in mind. It's you know, use your critical thinking skills. The botulinum toxin is also used for other medical applications, such as things for muscle spasms, dry eyes, excessive sweating under the underarms, because when injected in certain places in the body, it paralyzes certain parts of the body, and it can help with some of those situations. So again, the FDA is approving all of that. Okay, so now we've sufficiently scared you with the botulism stuff. Let me talk about some other safety issues with canning. Home canning your food is a very safe process. I don't want anybody to be afraid to do it. I have been doing it for years. Even though my mother and my grandmother canned, I didn't really learn a whole lot from them, so I kind of started out as a newbie a number of years ago and had to really figure out a lot of it by myself. And this is one reason I wanted to start this series of videos, is to help people that just know absolutely nothing about it. So, one of the things I'm going to talk about are your jars. So back in the day, they used to recommend that we boil all of our jars for 10 minutes in boiling water to kill all of the germs before we put any food in here. Well, as we know now, botulism is floating around in the air, in dust, in whatever. So honestly, you could boil this jar, pull it out of the boiling water, dump your food in there, and already have a botulism spore in there and not even realize it. So nowadays, we look at that as an unnecessary step. And I'm going to talk about why you might want to do that here in a minute. They also used to tell us to boil these for 10 minutes and then simmer them in the warm water until we're ready to put them on the top of our jar. They do not recommend doing that anymore. In fact, you will see warning labels on the boxes that will tell you that boiling these lids for long periods of time can sometimes degrade this rubber seal. And this rubber seal is your lifeline. That is what is going to be sealing your sterilized food inside of your jar and not letting any of those botulism spores in there, okay? So you don't want to do anything that's going to compromise this rubber seal. So they do not recommend simmering these or boiling these anymore. We just take them directly off the counter and pop them right on top of our jar when we're ready to seal it up. Okay, now, when I said there might be a time that you might want to put these jars in hot water or simmer them, this is what I was talking about. So mason jars are made of glass, and they're actually very heavy duty. It takes a lot to break one of these jars. I have dropped them right smack on the floor and had them not break. But one of the things that you have to be careful with is putting very, very hot food inside of a cold glass jar. Same thing with frozen food. If you're going to take a frozen bag of vegetables and can those, and yes, people do it, I've done it. If you don't have fresh available, then the next thing you go with is frozen, because it is really even better than fresh, but that's for another video. But if you're going to take frozen peas and dump them in this jar and then pour hot water over the top of it, that jar is going to go from room temperature to freezing cold to boiling hot all at the same time. That is the thing you want to avoid. Okay, so if you're going to put in cold food, you want to start with a cold jar. If you're going to put in hot food, you want to start with a warm jar. And that will prevent any cracking because of temperature adjustments. The other time you have to worry about these jars cracking or shattering or chipping off or anything else is when they are in the canning process. When you put these jars in the water bath canner or the pressure canner, the bubbling of the boiling water is going to make these jars shift around in there. And there's just nothing you can do about that. It's just going to do that. But if you have a couple of jars that are too far apart and they start clanking together in that high heat situation, you are more likely to have a jar shattered while you're canning. Everybody's had it happen. I've had it happen. It happens. It sucks because you have to throw every bit of that food away and then you lose a jar or multiple jars. How many of your jars end up breaking in there? So the best way to avoid this is when you're packing your canner with your jars and you don't have enough jars to completely fill the canner, you just want to go ahead and get one of these jars, fill it full of water, and put a lid on it and stick it in there as a cushion. That way you don't have to worry that these things are clanging around and banging on each other, and that way they will not bust and you don't have to worry about throwing out food. Or worse yet, get a little crack of glass inside the jar that goes down in your food and you don't know it and you end up eating it. Definitely something you want to avoid. Okay, another safety thing that we want to make sure of with our jars is we want to inspect our jars. I don't care if it's brand new, out of the box. You know, you guys have seen the Walmart people loading the shelves. They just throw everything everywhere and they don't take these out of the boxes. So wherever that box gets chunked, that jar is, you know, kind of just right there. And they may not always notice if there's a crack or a chip or something in a jar. So you just want to look through this. You want to make sure that you don't see any cracks. You don't see any chips off of it. You want to check this top portion here to make sure there are no chips on this top part, because that is where you tend to get a chip if you're going to have one. It will not seal properly if there is a chip off the top of this, because this rubber seal cannot connect with that. So the easiest way to tell if there's any kind of chip or anything on there, and be careful when you do this, is just run your finger across the top of it. If there is a chip or a crack, you're going to feel that on your finger. Don't do it too hard, because if there is a chip or a crack, you'll cut your finger. Now, the next thing that we're going to look at, it's also a safety issue, are inspecting your lids. You know, typically you expect them when they come in the box brand new that they're going to be perfect. Not always the case. When you're looking at mass manufacturing and you got machines putting the rubber seal on and another machine picking it up and moving it down the line to do the next thing on it, there's bound to be mistakes made that someone in quality control doesn't catch. So here is the deal. You want to make sure that your lids are flat and straight. You want to make sure there are no bends around these edges. You want to inspect your rubber seal and make sure that there are no cracks or dents or missing places on the rubber seal. And if you do all of those things, then this seal will work. Now, FDA recommends don't reuse these lids. Once you have used this to can food and you pop the lid off, you're supposed to throw it away and start with a new lid. I personally, and a lot of canners, do not do that because A, these lids are expensive. B, when craziness is going on in the world like it was during the pandemic, these lids were almost impossible to find. So if you didn't have enough lids and you're in a pandemic emergency situation, really wanting to can your food and make sure that you have food on the shelves, that's going to be a big issue if you don't have lids. Now, one way that I get around that, because again, if it's a used lid, you want to make doubly sure you inspect it and make sure there's nothing wrong with it. I use this little tool right here, and I'll show you how this works. Your lid is on here. You take this little spot right here and you just pop that lid right up. It will pull the lids off of your jars without bending or crimping the edges. It won't, you know, if we use a knife to try to pry that lid off, sometimes you'll cut the rubber seal and you'll have to throw that away. And you'll be able to hear it when you pop that lid off. You're going to hear a noise, and that's where you're hearing the vacuum releasing on the lid. So definitely you can reuse these. In fact, if you guys can see that, this is one that I will be reusing from some chicken broth that I canned. And I will put a link to this tool in the description box so that you guys will be able to find this. As you can see, mine is kind of old and almost getting rusty, and this thing is thick metal. It lasts forever. Once you buy one, you won't have to buy another one unless you just lose it. Okay, so another safety thing that I want to talk about is with the pressure canners. Now, I am very biased when it comes to pressure canners. I'm going to show you guys the pressure canner that I use. This is an All-American pressure canner. This metal is super, super thick all the way through the entire body of the canner. The lid is also super thick metal. It does not use a rubber seal in here like a lot of other canners do. So you don't have to worry that that rubber seal is going to crack or come apart while you're canning, and you don't have to replace it every year like you do with a lot of canner seals. Another thing that I absolutely love about this All-American pressure canner, and I'll tell you guys, I'm not sponsored by them. I don't get freebies from them. I just love this canner. Are these bolts right here that pop this lid down. When you get your lid on there straight, see if I can get this on here where I can show you guys. This pops up here, and you screw this lid down, and it has 6 of these, which goes all the way around the canner. This is not coming apart. As long as you stay within a safe pressure, which this gauge right here tells you exactly where your pressure and your temperature are. It has a red section right through here, so if you get anywhere near that section, you're going to know that you need to crank that heat down a little bit. And I do not worry when I have something canning on the stove. If I need to go out in my garden for 30 minutes and pick peas, or I need to go out and feed my pigs, I don't worry about walking out of the room and leaving this thing sitting on the stove. There are other pressure canners out there, and I'm sure they are perfectly safe. I do see some that worry me that have one little latch on the top, and that's the only latch they have that holds that down. Some of them have 2 latches. I have seen some that the lid pops on and screws over a little rim that's about a 1/16 of an inch out. Those kind of things worry me a little bit. Mainly because I'm just paranoid about burning my house down or having my canner lid shoot through my ceiling, which nobody wants. Definitely, again, I always recommend the All-American canner because it has all of these safety features. Now, that being said, they are more expensive. They're the most expensive canner on the market, pretty much. Other than maybe electric canners, I haven't priced those. I don't trust much that's electronic nowadays just because of all the parts coming from China, and I just don't trust that. But as far as these types of pressure canners go, this will last me until I pass it down to my daughter, who passes it down to her daughter. This thing will be here for probably generations and still be in working order. My canner here that I have is the 925 model. I bought it in 2019 for $300 just to show how much inflation has crept up there in the last 2.5, 3 years. This same canner is now $450. So the price of it has jumped by 50%. So it is a little pricier. Now they do have All-American canners that are smaller models, and those are cheaper. You're probably still looking at spending anywhere from $250 to $300 for a smaller version. I like the bigger version because I can do a lot of jars in here. But again, it's all going to depend on your budget and what you feel comfortable spending on a canner. Okay, so another safety issue is that when you are doing any type of canning, You want to make sure that you're using a recipe that has been vetted. And by vetted, what I mean is you want to make sure that you are using the proper pressure, the proper temperature, the proper amount of time to can something for the type of food that you are doing. The best way to do that is to get a book that has been shown time and time and time again to have safe recipes. Now, this is the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. It has over 400 recipes in it, and I'm not telling you have to get this book. I'm showing this as an example. As you can see, mine is very worn. If you do get this particular one, and I wish I would have done it when I bought it, I would get the spiral version, which has like plastic covers, and you can wipe it down, and it stays, not like this. And the other thing that this book is going to have is, in the recipes, it's going to show you what your time and temperature settings need to be, if your pressure, it needs to be at a certain place. It tells you where the levels of pressure need to be for your region. That's all based on your sea levels of where you live. If you're up in the mountains, it's going to be different than if you're down in a valley somewhere. And with the 400 recipes in here, you're going to find something in here that's going to be as close as you can get to what you want to can. And it will have all of the right information in there for that particular type of food. And there's charts in here. There's all kinds of tips in here about ways to make things easier, different products that you can use for different things. And so I definitely recommend a book. This book really is my favorite. But if not this book, then I would recommend maybe the Blue Ball Canning book. That is another one. And there are a lot of canning books out there. I just want to make sure that, especially if you guys are brand new, that you are making sure that you're following the right times and temperatures and pressures for your canning food. So I will go ahead and put a link to this in the description box. It will be a link to the spiral one with the plastic on the front. But feel free, if you don't want to do that one, to go ahead and do the paperback like I did here. Well, I want to thank you guys for joining me for class number 3 in Canning 101 series today. Now, next week, we are going to actually be canning some food for class number 4, and we're going to be doing some cherry pie filling. And the reason I'm going with a fruit like cherries is because I know that the pH level is pretty high because of that tartness. And I wanted to do something in the water bath canner so that I can really show you guys that portion of it first. After that, we'll jump into the pressure canning part of it as well. If you guys have something specific that you want to see me can in this series, please always feel free to leave it in the comment section, and I will try to get to all of that. I really wanted to do these classes for things that you guys are really wanting to learn how to can. And the last thing I'm going to ask you to do is just please be sure that you subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell to get all notifications, and that way you won't miss any of these canning videos or any of our other videos for here on our homestead. So thank you guys so much for watching, and happy canning.